34,000 years ago, two boys were buried in the frozen ground of what is now Russia under 10,000 hand-carved ivory beads. In 2017, scientists finally read their DNA. They should have been inbred. Their band was tiny, maybe 25 people scattered across hundreds of miles of ice, and the math says their parents should have been cousins. They weren't, not even close, which means somebody, 34,000 years ago, was keeping track. Somebody had rules about who slept with who. And tonight, when you scan a room or swipe or feel that pull toward one specific person, your brain is still running those rules.
Picture a woman on the cold steppe. Call her a Ra. She is 22 and her entire world is 25 people. She knows every one of them. She has watched most of them be born. And that is the problem. Of those 25, maybe 12 are men. Half of those are children or too old to hunt. Of the ones left, 2 are her brothers, 1 is her father's brother. Do the math. A Ra's entire pool of possible partners is about 3 men. 3 for her whole life.
This is the situation your ancestors faced for hundreds of thousands of years, and it is nothing like yours. You will pass more new faces on a walk to get coffee than Era saw in a decade. So how did she avoid pairing with her cousin? She walked. Twice a year, when the herds moved and the days stretched long, Era's band packed up and traveled, sometimes for weeks. They were heading toward a place where 3 or 4 other bands would arrive at the same time. Anthropologists call these aggregation sites. You can call them what they actually were, the first singles night.
Suddenly, Era is not looking at 3 men. She is looking at 40. There is fire and roasted meat and drumming and people singing songs her band has never heard. Strangers' faces lit orange. And there are rules, fierce ones. Which family lines are off limits? Who owes whom a daughter? Who is promised to a band 400 miles east? Here is the part that gets left out of the cave paintings. Ancient humans did not trade goods first. They traded people. Partners were the original currency of human alliance. A pairing was not a romance. It was a treaty. It meant that when your band starved, a band 100 miles away had a blood reason to feed you.
That is why the two boys were not inbred. The DNA study, led by Martin Sikora and published in Science in 2017, suggests those tiny groups were deliberately exchanging partners across a network stretching hundreds of miles. 25 people playing a game with a map bigger than most modern people's lives. And the bones show what happened to the groups that did not play it. In 2013, a team led by Kay Proofer sequenced a Neanderthal toe bone from a cave in Siberia. Her parents were as closely related as half-siblings. Her family tree, generation after generation, was cousins pairing with cousins. Those Neanderthals are gone.
So if the pool was that small and the rules were that strict, what was actually doing the choosing? Your nose, for one. In 1995, a Swiss biologist named Klaus Wedekind gave clean cotton t-shirts to a group of men and had them wear the shirts for 2 nights. No soap, no cologne, nothing scented. Then he had women smell the shirts and rate them. The women had never met these men, but the shirts they rated as most pleasant tended to belong to men whose immune systems were most different from their own. They were smelling immune genes. Scientists have argued about that study for 30 years, and the follow-up results are mixed, so treat it as a leading theory rather than a settled fact. But the same pattern shows up in other animals, and it points at something uncomfortable. A large part of what you call chemistry is a chemical report on somebody's DNA, delivered straight to a part of your brain you have no access to. Then there is what you would say out loud.
In 1989, the psychologist David Buss ran the biggest study of its kind ever attempted. 10,000 people, 37 cultures, 6 continents. One question, essentially. What do you want in a partner? The answers were startlingly consistent across the entire planet. Kindness near the top, almost everywhere. Then intelligence, then health, then age, then resources. With the same differences between men and women showing up again and again, no matter which country the study ran in. Which sounds like proof that humans know exactly what they want. It is not. Here is the twist.
Every one of those preferences was calibrated for Ara's world, a world where you would meet a few hundred possible partners in your entire life, and you would meet each of them slowly across seasons, watching them hunt, share, fail, and recover. A preference is a filter. A filter is only useful when the thing pouring through it is small enough to sort. Here is a claim worth arguing with. Nobody in history has ever really chosen who they fell for. You only ever chose who you stood next to, over and over, for long enough.
Now look at what the modern world hands you instead. A
a rectangle of glass, and behind it, several thousand faces. More potential partners in one evening than Era would have seen in 4 lifetimes. Your brain has no setting for this. If you want to know what else evolution never prepared you for, subscribe to Neanderthink. When the pool is 3, a preference is a decision. When the pool is 3,000, that exact same preference turns into a reason to reject. Every trait you like becomes a trait you are now scanning for, and every single person in front of you fails at least one check, because there is always another face waiting behind them. Psychologists call this choice overload. More options, less satisfaction, more regret about the one you picked. It was first demonstrated with jars of jam in a grocery store. Now it runs on the person you might spend your life with. Then there is the speed. Helen Fisher spent years putting people inside brain scanners while they looked at photos of someone they had just fallen for. The same circuit lit up nearly every time. Not the pleasure system, the wanting system, the one that pushes you to pursue and keeps pushing while the reward has not arrived yet. That system evolved to fire slowly, over months, in the presence of a real body you saw every single day. Now it fires in 4 seconds, from a photograph, and then nothing arrives, so it fires again on the next photograph, and the next. You are running a hunting instinct with no animal at the end of it. And here is what that costs. People are not lonely because they have too few options. Across the wealthy world, they have more options than any humans who have ever lived. They are lonely because the ancient machinery that turns a stranger into someone you trust needs one specific ingredient, and the modern world quietly deleted it. Time in the same room. That ingredient has a name. In 1968, a psychologist named Robert Sajong showed that people rate almost anything more positively the more times they have simply seen it. Faces, shapes, nonsense words, no conversation required, just repetition. That is not a flaw in your judgment. On the cold steppe, a face you had seen 100 times was a face that had not hurt you 100 times. Familiarity was the safety test. It was the closest thing your ancestors had to a background check.
Ara's world ran that test constantly, for free, whether she wanted it or not. Every person she might pair with, she watched for years. Your world does the exact opposite. Thousands of faces, almost no repetition. So here is the shift, and it is not be more open-minded, and it is not delete the apps. Stop trying to choose better. Start engineering repetition. The climbing gym every Tuesday, the same volunteer shift, the band practice you keep skipping, the class that meets for 12 weeks instead of 1. Any place where the same specific humans see you again next week and the week after, and notice when you are missing. That is not a life hack. That is you rebuilding the aggregation site. That is you handing your ancient brain the one input it was actually built to run on, and then getting out of its way. Those 2 boys, buried under 10,000 ivory beads, chose nothing. Their world chose for them, with rules and walking routes and firelight and 100 repeated winters. Somebody was keeping track. It was just never the person doing the falling. Next, find out what your ancestors ate when the winter killed everything.